Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be going over the Bartiromo report on Fox Business. She interviewed Niall Ferguson. He is my favorite writer. His focus is really history, right? Especially in academia. He used to be a professor over at Harvard, but he's now over at Stanford, or was at Stanford, and then moved to the Hoover Institute. So he's been moving around. So I'm not sure where. I think he's at the Hoover Institute now. But he's professionally and academically focused on history, but how it couples with economics and finance. And because of that, some of his writings, a lot of people think that he's an economist. I've met Niall Ferguson in person through INET multiple times. I think it was twice. And, again, he's my favorite author. I like his style. And I agree with his assessment on Iran and on China. So let me play it. And this video will probably be a shorter video. We'll drop into maybe Al Jazeera and see if there's any new stuff popping up here. But let me play this. Before I do that, the Dow is at around 23 points up, and the S&P 500 is up by 4 points, so it's still stable as of this recording. This is November 6th at about 10:26.
With the Turkish foreign minister today. This visit coming after two surprise trips yesterday, where Blinken went to the West Bank to meet with Palestinian Authority President Abbas, then to Baghdad to meet with the Iraqi Prime Minister. Blinken discussing the 32 recent drone and rocket attacks against U.S. forces in the region. He also issued this warning. Watch.
It was very important to send a very clear message to anyone who might seek to take advantage of the conflict in Gaza to threaten our personnel here or anywhere else in the region. Don't do it. I made very clear that the attacks, the threats coming from militia that are aligned with Iran are totally unacceptable, and we will take every necessary step to protect our people.
I'm not sure if anybody's actually getting the message. Joining me right now is historian and Hoover Institute Senior Fellow at Stanford University, Niall Ferguson. Niall, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. Assess where we are in this war for us, Niall.
Well, I would say that this is the third time that Joe Biden's administration has failed to deter an opponent. They failed to deter the Taliban in Afghanistan. They failed to deter Russia with respect to Ukraine, and they failed to deter Iran in the Middle East. It really should be the United States that's threatening Iran and its proxies, not the other way around. We've got two aircraft carrier strike groups in the region. Why isn't Antony Blinken telling Tehran, if your proxies continue their war against Israel, we will use these forces against Iranian facilities and not just against their proxies such as Hezbollah? So I do think that there's a pattern here in the foreign policy of this administration. It's a pattern of failing to deter antagonists.
Yes, that's exactly right. And instead, what we're hearing is warnings from Iran. The defense minister warning that the United States will be, quote, hit hard if it does not stop the war in Gaza and secure a ceasefire. Hamas confirmed its leader met with Iran's Ayatollah in Tehran, Neil. And this administration has been very hard pressed to actually connect the dots to Iran. And now Iran is out and out warning the United States. What should the U.S. do now?
It's a topsy-turvy world, Maria. From the outset, over 4 weeks ago, the United States government has tried to argue that somehow Iran was not directly involved in the hideous atrocities perpetrated against Israelis by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It's completely implausible. Nobody can possibly believe this. And it's just appeasement, I'm afraid. It's appeasement of Iran that the administration, of course, set out from the very outset to change policy in the Middle East. It walked away from a successful strategy that the Trump administration had been pursuing the Abraham Accords to bring Israel closer to its Arab neighbors. And instead, Joe Biden and his team decided to resuscitate the effectively dead Iran nuclear deal. This took the pressure off the Iranian economy, and it also sent a signal to the extremists and fanatics in Tehran that the United States was indeed back. The United States that in the past has failed to stand by its allies and has allowed its opponents to run riot. So I'm afraid this was all predictable from quite early on. Unfortunately, Israelis have paid the price, and unfortunately, American troops are now paying the price in the region, as you said at the beginning of your report.
That's exactly right. Our troops are getting attacked. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
This administration is getting kickbacks with the deals that they've been doing with Iran. This administration is appeasing the woke left. This administration is not willing to do the right thing and get the job done. This administration and the military brass at the Pentagon are a bunch of wussies. They're more worried about the gender fluidity in the military and using the proper pronoun and making sure that you can do gender reassignment operations that your tax dollars are going to be paying for. I mean, really, look at them. I mean, General Miley is just such a wussy, just a total wussy.
Was with me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures discussing China and its role in terms of supporting these dictators. Watch.
The Chinese Communist Party talks about American decline, but they don't just talk about it, they advocate for it. And you see that in all forms of social media. You see that in their espionage operations here in the United States. They are deeply watching the United States. They're working alongside Hamas, cheering them on, in spite of the fact that there were 1,400 barbaric deaths. And we shouldn't forget 30 Americans who lost their lives that day as well. The Chinese Communist Party, the Russians, the Iranians, they are all working against the basic human decency that America has stood for 250 years. And they are knee deep in this conflict as well. And they're watching how we behave in Ukraine today.
And this, of course, Neil, from the architect of the Abraham Accords, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. What concerned me yesterday was also what the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said. That was Michael Mullen, who said that the relations between China and the U.S. are coming apart. But he doesn't see it as a way to for the United States to come back at China. He says it's a dangerous situation. Watch this.
I just think if we decouple, we have no way to communicate, and we have every way to miscalculate. I'm actually happy to see us to start talking about nuclear weapons. Chinese, their buildup of nuclear weapons, these weapons that can essentially eliminate the world, has been extraordinary. And to not be able to have discussions about how do you contain those weapons, which could end life on Earth, I think is really important. And if we're
what did I say? Last video and the video before that, we are moving towards unconventional warfare. That is biologics, chemical, radiological, and whatever else we've dreamt up with. And it's not just developed nations, but rogue actors are going to be able to get some unconventional warfare. It's harder for a rogue element to get, let's say, a nuke, right? Especially the deployment capability of that. Dirty bomb, yeah, it could happen, right? But when you start moving towards chemical and biological, the barriers of entry are so much lower. A grad student in molecular biology or in virology or in bacteriology or biotech could easily create weapons. Easily. Same thing. A grad student in chemistry could easily make chemical weapons. So, and there's an awful lot of educated engineers, chemists, biologists in the Middle East, especially in Iran. I'll be honest. I mean, some of the smartest students that I've ever seen weren't Chinese. They were Iranians. They're smart. And if they're radicalized, you got a problem. This is moving towards unconventional warfare. And I keep on saying the borders of Israel are going to grow. And how are they going to grow? They're going to grow through unconventional means. Now, who uses the unconventional warfare? Maybe it's the enemy. Maybe it's going to be the allied forces. Maybe it's both. I don't know. But there's going to be a serious reduction in population, not just in that region, in the world. And here again, mankind is being judged. And to be honest, if you really sat and you put a list, sit down and list why mankind should stay alive and not be judged harshly, or, on the other side of the list is why there should be strong judgment on mankind. And I'm willing to bet that there are more reasons to destroy mankind than to save mankind. We have all failed. Now, there's some people go, how do I? It's the same people that try to hide during the last crisis, right? How do I survive this? How do I hide? Don't hide. Just live your life. But realize that most of mankind isn't worth saving. And that there's going to be collateral damage around the world when these unconventional means are used. And realize that your comfortable life as an American is just about to end.
Completely apart. There's no way to have those discussions as they build up their military and their capability.
I mean, Neil, you heard those words from Michael Mullen. The admiral said China is working on weapons to end life on Earth.
Well, I'm glad that Admiral Mullen brought this up, because not enough attention is paid to the very rapid accumulation of China's nuclear arsenal, also their arsenal of hypersonic missiles. In fact, China's building up just about every kind of weapon right now at a frenetic pace. I mean, I know we're supposed to think TikTok is the principal threat to the United States, but I can assure you it's not. We have to understand, Maria, that we're in Cold War II. And in this Cold War, as in the first Cold War, there are all kinds of proxy conflicts going on. In the first Cold War, it was the Soviets who had a hand in conflicts from Vietnam to Korea to the Middle East. Now it's China, and China is involved very closely in Russia's war effort in Ukraine. Russia would not be able to carry on that war effort without China's dual-use equipment that it's exporting to Russia in great quantities. And the idea that China's not paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East is obviously fanciful. They're major buyers of Iranian oil. So we have to understand that the United States faces a kind of, I call it the axis of ill will. China, Russia, let's not forget Iran, and North Korea are all acting in concert in a way that the so-called axis of evil really wasn't back in 2002, when George W. Bush used that famous phrase.
Yeah, exactly. China and the United States discussing the nuclear arms control this week. This will be the first such talk since the Obama administration. But Neil, I mean, when you take a look at this upcoming meeting that Joe Biden will have with Xi Jinping, is there anything that could come out of that meeting in your view? I mean, Michael Mullen said what he wants to see come out of that meeting is both leaders say, we will not go to war over Taiwan. He said anything short of that is just, we're coming apart, more evidence that we're coming apart. But Neil, I find it highly unlikely that either of those men will say we will not go to war over Taiwan. What's your take about this meeting? We're going to talk with Gordon Chang about this as well, but this meeting is coming up between Biden and Xi Jinping.
Well, it's obviously better than no meeting, because throughout Cold War I, we communicated with the Soviet Union, and that is important. I think Admiral Mullen is right. To have zero communications would increase the risk of unintended conflict. But I'd be very surprised if an enormous breakthrough occurred. After all kinds of members of the administration have been to Beijing recently, including our Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary, and there's really nothing to talk about. They don't come talking about the things that China wants to discuss. In fact, we keep ramping up the pressure on semiconductors where China is especially vulnerable. So it's unlikely to me, given Xi Jinping's statements and the evidence that he is preparing China for war, that there's going to be a great bromance when Joe Biden and he meet. Of course, they used to get on just
Yeah,
fine.
I'll rewind this a little bit, right? Because I want to make a statement here. Okay. So you have, these are, you know, top Biden officials, all right? You have Anthony Blinken, Janet Yellen, John Kerry, and Gina Raimondo. All right, so the Secretary of State, Blinken, Treasury Secretary Yellen, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, Kennedy, or Kerry, John Kerry, and then the Commerce Secretary is Gina. All right, so Blinken. The Secretary of State needs to be more forceful in Iran, and that stop the appeasement, because he's looking weak when he's doing his speeches. Janet Yellen has been notorious for misjudging what was going on with inflation. And she's running the Treasury Department like a drunken sailor. And she is destroying the dollar. Kerry, he's just promoting this false narrative that the climate is going to change so radically that mankind is going to die, right? And that we're going to have 400 feet of water and all this stuff, right? But I wonder how he's going to benefit from it if we move towards this ESG type investing and have the 15-minute cities and reduce your American consumption and all this. And the Commerce Secretary, I haven't really paid attention to, so I don't really have a strong take on her. You know, if I listen to some of her speeches or something, I'll probably find something I don't like. But I don't know much about her from Mondo. But Blinken's looking weak with Iran. Yellen sucks at being a Treasury Secretary and destroying the American dollar. And, you know, not being forceful and saying the United States is spending too much. We're issuing too many damn bonds. We need fiscal policy that gets back to conservatism. And Kerry, you know, he's a billionaire.
Statements and the evidence that he is preparing China for war, that there's going to be a great bromance when Joe Biden and he meet. Of course, they used to get on just fine back in the days when China was using the language of win-win cooperation, but those days are long gone. We're in Cold War II now, and these Cold War summits can go wrong. The best thing I think they can hope for is that the atmospherics should not be too hostile.
All right, we will be watching all of that. Neil, it's good to get your insights. Thanks very much for being here this morning.
You know, some of the takeaways that I get from this is, you know, some of the terms: Cold War II, axis of, it wasn't axis of evil, it was axis of ill intent or something like that. I forgot the term he used. But I think he's right about this Cold War II. All right, let's drop into Al Jazeera talking about the U.S. nuclear sub.
And there's some overlap here between the two gentlemen in the region. What they're doing is really trying to, first of all, limit the civilian casualties that are still ongoing as a result of Israel's war on Gaza. So what we're seeing is an attempt to try and get Israel to have a more targeted campaign, given the fact that it is not yielded to international calls for humanitarian pauses or even a ceasefire. So the reason the CIA director is there is to really try and work on intelligence sharing to see that there could be a more targeted approach. The other reason is that there is still an attempt with regard to the
Episode 88, I said that's exactly what was happening. It was all about intelligence sharing because of this new thing that came up with the hospitals and the tunnels.
Intelligence sharing in trying to get more of those hostages, not just Americans, but from other nations as well. So this is sort of what they are in the region to do, is they also try to explore relationships with, they meet with other leaders and from other nations in the area so that they can sort of try and take advantage of those relationships as well in terms of trying to free some of those hostages.
Okay, Kimberly, thank you very much for that. Kimberly Hockett live for us there at the White House. Well, let's now discuss all these latest developments with Sultan Barakat, who is the director of the Global Institute for Strategic Research at Hamad bin Khalifa University here in Doha, joining us on the News Hour. Thank you so much, Sultan, for being with us. Let's start with the milestone, the grim milestone that we've reached today. 10,000 Palestinians killed in the past 30 days by Israeli strikes. It is incredible that we've reached such a number in 30 days. This hasn't happened in previous conflicts. When does it stop?
Yes, it hasn't happened before. And I don't think it would have happened if it wasn't for Israel involvement and the backup of the United States, the blind support the United States is giving to Israel. My fear, and this is I've been saying for weeks now, knowing Netanyahu and the way he thinks, he will not stop before he restores his pride by restoring the ratio of 1 to 10. So we're in for more, and only
So over 10,000 Palestinians have been killed based on Israeli bombardment per the health ministry of Gaza. Now, is it accurate? I don't know. Maybe. But the thing is that this is going to go, this is going to get bad. It needs to get bad because Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran need to be destroyed.
which is 14,000, that he will probably start talking sense to the many diplomats that are now littering the region. They're all over the place. They're all coming here to try to talk to him. He's not heeding to anyone. He has made Blinken's mission incredibly difficult. He's not giving an ounce on to support him. At the same time, he's trying to, I think, to make it of such a level, the crisis, that the international community, unified, all in one word, in one voice, will come to Egypt demanding that it opens its border.
Right, because right now the international community, at least the West, is not speaking in one voice. The Europeans today came out with some very strong language, some unusually strong language. The EU Foreign Policy Chief, Joseph Borrell, saying the tragedy unfolding in the Middle East is a result of a collective political and moral failure. He said the Israeli and Palestinian people are paying a heavy price as a result, and this price will continue to rise if we refuse to see the situation directly. Eliminating Hamas, he says, if it happens, will not solve the problem, and that the solution to the conflict is not military. Are you surprised to see this new language from the Europeans when in the early days of the war, of course, they've expressed unequivocal support to Israel? What's changing?
They're worried. The Europeans are worried about their own protests that are going on, and they're held hostage because they have so many sleeper cells of the Islamic Caliphate roaming around in Europe because of this open border policy that they had. It's metastasizing, and they're being held hostage in a loose sense. They don't have as many degrees of freedom. The politicians don't have as many degrees of freedom to be able to really root out the problem in the Middle East. telling you, God is judging. God is judging this. God is giving enough rope to hang all these people that are are these liberals that want to be appeasement. I have to put we have to add another category of people that are getting that are on the negative side of this. Not only are it's the ultra liberals, right? The blue-haired ultra liberals, but now you have the appeasers, right? That are maybe middle ground, but they're afraid of conflict. The key here is not to be afraid. Now, what did God say to the Jews, in Numbers, right? Take the land. And Moses had them scout out. The spies scouted out, and they were afraid of the mightiness of some of the people that they may have to do battle with. So the spies told Moses and the children of Israel, how mighty the people were, and God punished the Jews for not following the idea that it's not going to be the hand of the human. It's going to be the hand of God that allows for the war to be won. When the moment you are, I'm afraid, then what happens is the blessing moves away. And so it'll be harsher to get through the battle. In the case of Numbers, they had to roam around for even longer in the desert because of some of the issues that they weren't willing to go and follow and listen to the will of God. All right. Now the super rationalists will go, oh, this is all fairy tale and blah blah blah. And this is just trying to do justification for killing and blah blah blah. Ishmael and Esau, certain subsets of from their lineage were not killed off when they were told to be killed off. And we are now living through it. We kicked the can down the road 2,000 years or more. We have kicked the can down the road in contemporary times for about 70 years. And we have really kicked the can down the road for the last 15 years. The bottom line is it only gets worse. And it's just more and more crazy people that we got to deal with now. I'm not wrong on this. Humans have to reach a steady state, a new equilibrium. And that new equilibrium will be through mass destruction.
A little bit late and contradicts what was said at the beginning, but I think some countries such as Spain, Ireland, Belgium, even to some extent, have played a role in moderating the European Union position. That is very important. For the EU, they must keep in mind all the time that this is a neighborhood. This is not like for the US. The US for them is thousands of miles away, and if it wasn't for Israel, again, they would not have been here. But for the Europeans, these are their neighbors. If they don't stay in Gaza, they're going to end up in Europe. And a repeat of the displacement that followed Syria before and the various crises in the Middle East is not in the interest of the Europeans. So aside from the moral position that we had hoped that they will take much, much earlier, I think strategically it's a disaster for Europe that, again, something within the neighborhood, they have to wait for the Americans to come and deal with it. And as much as they love the American publicly, you and I know that Europeans do not like the Americans to be in the region. They do not want them to be present physically in our region. And the same question really has to be asked by the American public. What are they doing here? When they already started a front in Ukraine against superpower Russia, they're now being dragged into a confrontation, very likely now it's become with Iran and other Middle Eastern forces. As Hezbollah said the other day, their ships here become a target. They've come right.
And yet they're moving more military assets into the region. They seek more deterrence. But
they're taking their eye off the real threat for the United States, which is China. I mean, they keep saying that the one country that challenge their domination globally is China, who has its eye on Taiwan. And now they're spread in two fronts that has nothing to do with direct American interests. And China is the third, I think, is to come. So all these questions are going to be asked by the Americans, including the cost. I mean, it's incredible amount of money, billions and billions of dollars that are paid by the taxpayer. I don't know if anyone ever sat and made a calculation per capita. How much are they contributing to a folly? It's a terrible, terrible, terrible position.
So what do you think might change the Biden administration's stance right now, 30 days in? You know, what is it domestic pressure from within the US that might take them to rethink their strategy?
I think the only hope is in Jewish community pressure. And I think this is the first time again that it happened that Jewish communities have lobbied and came out and said, not in our name. We're not part of this. We do not condone the killing of the Palestinians, the massacres that are taking place. And it's only them that can change the equation. And to his mind, to his politicians, they're also focused on the elections. And they're seeing Trump dropping into positions trying to compete in support of Israel.
He's doing well in the polls
compared to better than Trump as far as AIPAC is concerned and the Israeli lobbies in Washington. So it's only the American Jewish public, I think, that will really sway this towards the moral compass again.
Sultan Baraka, interesting to hear your thoughts about this. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll look forward, of course, to having more of your analysis throughout the evening here on Al Jazeera. And still ahead, our coverage of Israel's war on Gaza continues, including the story of a Palestinian man attacked by Israeli settlers as the number of such assaults almost triples in a month. Stay with us.
Hello, more rain is being steered into Belize, Guatemala, southern Mexico as well. So it's not a question if we'll see flooding, but just where and how bad it will be. It's been pouring rain for days now. And speaking of flooding, flash flood alerts have been extended for the tiny island nation of Barbados with this batch of weather that also drops down to near Trinidad and Tobago. It's been a parade of storms, Western Canada, Pacific Northwest. This is an atmospheric river, so it's packing a punch, sometimes referred to as a river in the sky. And it drops its moisture as far south as Northern California, so some rain in the forecast today for San Francisco on Monday. Then this storm system will produce snow for Northern Ontario and Quebec, but for the lower Great Lakes, it will be rain. We've got a warmer feed of air, if we can call it that, and it's feeling more like summer for the southern U.S., 28 in Houston, looking good in Arkansas, and St. Louis, Missouri as well. High temperatures here. There have been some flooding rains in Venezuela that's pushing into Colombia, storms through Brazil's Amazonas state, so that's not back to 10.
Nothing at all, waiting to see how things go. Israel and Palestine have a strong, long, complicated history on the African continent. For example, Israel helped some countries in Africa end colonial rule. Right now, they're helping countries with technology, infrastructure, agriculture, etc. Whereas Palestine helped countries on the continent also end colonial rule as well. So long, complicated ties with both Israel and Palestine. And that's why you're seeing many opinions on the continent right now, very mixed. Harun Mutasa, Al Jazeera, Haran.
Still ahead on Al Jazeera, we'll be taking a look at some of the day's other news. And Ukraine launches a criminal investigation after a Russian missile strike reportedly killed at least 19 of its soldiers. We'll be live in Kyiv.
Business Latest is sponsored by Interlac, Turkey's real estate consultant. Business Latest is sponsored by Interlac, Turkey's real estate consultant.
and from going to school. More than 70% won't attend this year, according to the United Nations. Others are waiting for schools to open in areas free of conflict. Al Jazeera's Hiba Morgan reports from Port Sudan.
7 months ago.
So while they're talking about Sudan, I'll do a commercial for PNN. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description, and purchase the structural nano silver toothpaste. This will neutralize pathogens, whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce that gum inflammation. And by doing that regularly, you're going to reduce your chances of developing cardiovascular disease and valvular disease. This is a great toothpaste. It is the best toothpaste that you're going to be able to get. Go to my store, get a few tubes of this. This will, again, help with that whole anti-aging protocol. You know, it's a synergistic kind of method that I have. So go to the store and get your toothpaste. I also sell structural nano silver gel. This is a great product to be able to improve your skin on a regular basis. Just put it on your skin right before you go to bed. You can put it on your whole body or just on your neck and your face, where you'll notice in the morning that your skin will start to feel tighter. And when you couple this with drinking 64 ounces of water throughout the day that's filtered, no fluoride, don't drink fluoride water. 64 ounces of filtered water. You take the collagen and vitamin C that I offer on my store, and what will happen is that dermal layer, the layer lower in your skin, will start to build better. There's going to be this cross-linking that takes place, and your extracellular matrix in your dermal layer will improve. And what will happen over time when you take this product, the C60, the vitamin C, the resveratrol, and the collagen together, what will happen is your skin will improve so much more. So I have these anti-aging boxes. I have a skincare box, so you can just do a one-click and purchase the beginner's box or the advanced box. The advanced box has the C60 and the resveratrol. The beginner's box only has the vitamin C, the gel, and the collagen. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the products that will help to slow down your aging, improve your skin, and neutralize pathogens. This will neutralize pathogens. If you put it around your mouth, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils, around your ears and around your ear canal, lightly coat, around your eye, around your eyes when they're closed, lightly coat, you're neutralizing pathogens for 5 hours, and have that on your hands. Well, that's a lot better than Perel. Perel, you can't put it around your eyes and all that because it's toxic. This you can. You can do that, neutralize pathogens. And we're going through cold season, so when you're at work or at school and you're trying to prevent being sick, it's a great way to do it. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and neutralize those pathogens.
It's not just the players, but also the fans who are exposed while sitting in the stands for hours.
We're going to go to France 24 here. Looks like something's happening.
Hamas says Israel is bombing intensely around several hospitals in the north of the territory. The Israeli army once again accused the militants of using the hospitals to hide and to fire missiles from. Releasing these pictures, they said, was proof. The allegations have been repeatedly denied by Hamas leaders, who also called for international monitors to be allowed to inspect the hospitals. Despite mounting international pressure, on Sunday, the Israeli Prime Minister rejected calls for a ceasefire.
I want you to know that there's one thing that we won't do, and there won't be a ceasefire without the return of our hostages. Take it completely out of the lexicon. We say to our enemies and to our friends, we'll simply carry on until we win.
Following the October 7th attack, Israel promised to destroy Hamas. But a month into its offensive, militants continue to fire rockets into central Israel.
Well, Israel has continued to reiterate its calls for Palestinians in the north of Gaza to move further south. Many have been trying to do so, but finding the route dangerous. And with fuel supplies all but exhausted, most people are forced to make the journey on foot. Siobhan Silk has this report.
They're exhausted by the incessant bombardment in northern Gaza, now exhausted by hours of trekking, by foot and wheelchair, or by horse-drawn cars as they follow.
This is TV7. This was released 4 minutes ago.
Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7 Israel at War update. And today is the 31st day since the Islamist terror groups from the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, perpetrating a massacre of 1,400 mostly civilians, abducting over 240 others, including infants and children, and wounding over 4,800. As we continue to update you from here in Jerusalem, without further ado, let's turn to Central Israel, where we're joined by TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Owen. Amir, what can you update us with on the latest?
So, Jonathan, in physics as well as in the military art, everyone is familiar with time-space equations. And if Israel is not too stingy with its time, it will have its diplomatic space very constricted. It must advance much more swiftly in order to get to the core of the Hamas command and control network and find and execute the leaders of the barbaric massacre perpetrated exactly a month ago. And if it doesn't do so, the forces around it, both the moderate Arab countries as well as Western countries, not to speak of those hostile to Israel, will limit its freedom of maneuver. So the forces are in Gaza. They have cut the strip in two. There was a time when a French author used to say that he loves Germany so much that he wants it to remain divided between West and East. Israel loves Gaza so much that it now has North Gaza and South Gaza. In Jerusalem, we had a terror act today. A female officer, a police officer, was stabbed and badly wounded. And in the north, still rockets and the evacuation of most of the inhabitants there.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Let's turn immediately to the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Kavish. General, could you provide us with an operational update focused particularly on the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip?
I can't stand him talking.
Well,
Drives
thank
me
you,
nuts.
Jonathan. I think it is important to highlight what was said by the IDF in the last 24 a bit more hours. And this is that basically the Gaza Strip now is being split into two parts. The northern part, where the Gaza city is there, the majority of the Hamas terrorists are there, their infrastructures, their command post, and so on, and then the south part of the Gaza Strip. So from a military point of view, Gaza Strip now is being contained. The IDF is around it and starting the fight into the city itself against the Hamas terrorists. Of course, the Air Force strikes are still there against Hamas targets. So I think this is something significant that was released yesterday. The other thing that was released is the Israeli Air Force asking again and again the civilians on the north part to move to the south part of the Gaza Strip. There were flyers that were sent to them, more than 20,000 telephone calls that civilians received from
So as I'm doing this recording and playing this video here, I'm premiering on one of the channels, and Jason in the chat box said that, and I'll read it. He said that the submarine is most likely the USS Florida, which left Scotland a few days ago. One of the Ohio class converted to Tomahawk missiles only. So they don't have any nukes. So when I saw this in the news about the sub, the US nuke sub, the way they spun it in the news, you could interpret it as there was nuclear weapons. So it looks like it's not nuclear weapons, it's Tomahawks, according to Jason. And so, you know, if I get something wrong, I'm willing to admit to it. All right. I don't like try to hide, you know, a mistake. It's okay. It's like, you know, there's a lot going on, and, you know, and there's a certain framing when you're watching all these different news networks, and if you don't know, you know, something, and someone else does in the chat, and they say, hey, you know, it looks like it's Tomahawk missiles, not nukes, and that the sub is nuclear powered. Okay, so most likely it's the USS Florida, according to Jason in the chat, and that it's probably Tomahawk missiles, not nuclear missiles. So, all right, so that's a little bit better in terms of escalation of unconventional warfare in the Middle East through nuclear subs, or nuclear weapons on subs. But if they're moving in with Tomahawks, then it looks like they're going to do a strike, probably in Syria and Lebanon, potentially even in Iran. But I would think that with Iran, you have to do a blitzkrieg. So, in short, thank you, Jason, for that extra information I didn't know.
The Europe is totally irrelevant. So whatever they say have a little impact. The more important actor here is obviously the White House and the US.
With that being said, if I may follow up on this very briefly, we see that the masses of Islamist migrants into Europe, joined by basically the left wing, or the marginal left wing within continental Europe. The United Kingdom, of course, is also plagued with that. What can you tell us about the complexities at hand from that perspective? I hear from many people across Europe who are quite concerned by this development and are looking towards their governments for a tangible response.
Yes, indeed. I think for the first time in many decades, people have seen what young immigrants from the Muslim country, very radicalized, very opposed to our way of life, can be able and willing to do, you know, to Israel and to Jews, people living in Europe, and to us, all which are infidels in theory, you know, according to their radical views. But at the same time, we have a powerful left in Europe, which is still looking for a new proletariat, and they think they found it in the radical Islam. No? So it's a complex situation, obviously.
Let's turn immediately also to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett. Thank you for joining us, General. I'd like to hear your perspective from the American administration's conduct at this stage, obviously demanding or calling on Israel for a pause, being rejected until and unless hostages are released in exchange for such a humanitarian pause. And I think it's also important to distinct, for the sake of our viewers, a pause usually lasts only for a couple of hours as opposed to a ceasefire, which may last for a couple of days. What are the complexities in the approach to such a matter?
Well, first of all, I would note that it is clear that Blinken came into the region with a view of humanitarian pause, but now he's even rejected the notion of ceasefire and pause. But I think it's important also, Jonathan, if I can diverge for a moment, the protests that happened over the weekend, the pro-Palestinian protests in America, are becoming very, very intelligent, and Biden is sitting up and watching. Their protest theme yesterday was no ceasefire, no votes. And it's important to recognize that we have a significant moderate Muslim community inside of Michigan, one of the battleground states. So I think you're really seeing the Palestinian supporters in America getting away from anti-Semitism in their message to more of, we want to see aid to Gaza, or we're going to hold back our votes. And for a situation that Biden is in right now, where his support is already slipping, and has been well before October.
That's what I've been saying in these different videos that I've been doing. The Biden administration only cares about getting reelected. They don't give a damn, and they'll sell Israel down the road. And I think this is the tightrope that that Blinken is walking on, because I think he wants to be more forceful in the region, but I think the Biden administration is actually tying his hands, because the Biden administration only wants to be able to skim more money by giving more money to Iran. The Democratic Party is completely corrupt, and that they are, they're concerned about the general election. I'm telling you, I hope that Trump gets reelected and that we do some serious kicking ass.
Seventh, I don't think that we can ignore what's going on in the States with regards to Palestinian protests linked to Biden votes linked to Biden policy.
And with regard, if I may ask that you follow up on the various complexities right now that the United States is dealing with. Obviously, we heard of a nuclear submarine that is also being now deployed into the region in order to contend with ongoing prospects of wider escalation.
It's so, when someone, I guess when someone doesn't know, and I didn't know this, when someone just says nuclear submarine, what does that mean? Is that nuclear powered submarine, or does that mean nukes on the sub? And that's just where Jason, maybe he's ex-military, I don't know, but he seemed to know quite a bit about the submarine. So, he may have been in the Navy. I don't know, but it looks like it's not nuclear weapons on the sub, just Tomahawk missiles. But when they phrase it, even this guy, the way he phrased it, nuclear sub, what does that mean? Nuclear powered sub, I guess, would be a better term to use, because you can misunderstand what exactly does that mean.
So let me be very clear. That is a submarine that is equipped with conventional weapons, but all of our nuclear submarines, all of our submarines are nuclear powered. So this is not a nuclear armed submarine coming into the region.
See, a lot of people make that mistake.
A significant amount of capability as regards cruise missiles, which could be extremely effective.
All right, so Tomahawk cruise missile type. So it looks like Jason's right about this. Now, why do you come to my channel and listen to Dr. Paul Cottrell and PNN, right? I always have a little nugget of a backstory, right? So look, if you look at this picture, we're in the, so it would be his right, over his right shoulder, right by his right ear. There's a book on the bookshelf, and it's Marshall. It's the famous Marshall Plan, right after World War II, right? And Marshall was an advisor to the president during the war. And what is interesting is that I saw a lecture, an author that wrote a book about Marshall and Stimson, I think it is, and how they worked together to ramp up the war effort during World War II, their backstory during World War I, and how they executed the war and then started the peace process, and all the relationships that were going on with Patton and Eisenhower. Eisenhower and Marshall were the top two that Roosevelt was deciding to actually be the field general for D-Day. Marshall had more experience in being having an advisory role, while Eisenhower had some experience fielding an army. I think it was in the Philippines. So eventually Roosevelt decided, okay, Marshall's going to be on the advisory role, and that Eisenhower was going to run D-Day. And the rest is quote history. But I just think that that lecture that I saw at the Harvard Club on Marshall was just absolutely fascinating. Once in a while, you'll listen to an author, and it's like, you don't like their work, and it's like, but sometimes you just wish that they would just talk for 4 or 5 hours. And that was the kind of author that this individual was. I don't remember the author's name. I'd have to look it up. But it's a recent book that just came out on Marshall. But it's so coincidental, that it's right there, Marshall in the book in the background. And he's famous for the Marshall Plan, right? But he did so much more and was so much more instrumental in the whole World War II effort. Extremely intelligent individual, and had a lot of integrity and duty to country. Fascinating individual, absolutely fascinating. But that's a little backstory, seeing the author, talk about Marshall and the war effort at the Harvard Club, and it just, the first thing that popped in my mind was that lecture when I saw the book behind his ear. But just looking at this from a poetic way, it's almost like Marshall trying to be instrumental in peace. You have to go through war, but then there has to be a conclusion to the war, and then a peace that happens. Marshall was not an appeaser at all. He believed in all-out win. All right. But once you win, you have to have a plan to maintain the peace. And so poetically, and this is why you go to my channel, poetically, it's almost like Marshall, even though he's in the grave, right? He's whispering to people. He's whispering in the ears of people what to do. And what are the two things? All-out war and a lasting peace. All-out war, a lasting peace. Not appeasement. Appeasement doesn't have lasting peace. All-out war, lasting peace. So I just, poetically, Marshall is whispering in all of our ears, and we need to pay attention.
In, say, a Hezbollah attack from southern Lebanon. So it is clear that while there are the political considerations going on in Washington, D.C., it's also clear that CENTCOM is still ignoring the politics, focusing on its mission, which is the defense of friends and allies in the region.
Thank you, General. Let's turn immediately also to Mr. Owen. I'd like also to hear about the complexities with the hostages. Ongoing negotiations are taking place. Obviously, Secretary of State Blinken was here to also deliberate this matter, but we heard also that CIA Director William Burns is in the country, also communicating with his interlocutors in order to advance a cause that is as much as American as it is Israeli, as well as 30 other nations who have their citizens being currently held hostage by the Islamist Hamas in Gaza.
Yes, but first, just as a footnote to what General Tibbet just said, in effect, what the US is giving Israel is a second strike capability, conventionally, of course, so that if Israeli air bases are being hit, of course, the Israeli Air Force has made preparations to disperse its fighter planes. It is not waiting for a surprise attack. But nevertheless, Hezbollah now knows that even if it manages to cripple Israel's strategic arm, the U.S. With its carrier task forces and the submarine can supply Israel with a second strike. Now, regarding the hostages, obviously this is the top priority for President Biden, and it seems that even within Israel, it has climbed up the ladder. It used to be almost an afterthought at first, and now, because of the domestic pressure by the hostage families and their supporters, the Israeli government must consider it its top priority, at least on the timeline. It is much more urgent than taking care of the Hamas leadership, which can wait another day, another week. And apparently, because the cabinet has designated Mossad chief Dadi Barnea as the man to go regarding the hostage negotiations, it makes sense that his counterpart, DCI Burns, is in the region in order to effect it.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. General Gavish, I'd like to hear from your perspective an operational update, if you will, about our current challenges up north, considering the fact that Hezbollah has not ceased any hostilities following Hassan Nasrallah's speech and is probing the Israeli border, obviously conducting itself in a similar fashion to what the Palestinian so-called rioters were doing in the weeks leading up to the onslaught on October 7th.
Well, you're right, Jonathan. We still see those operations in the northern, in our northern border with the Hezbollah terrorist organization. We should say that we are still under the war thresholds, and all the hostilities that we see there are, I would say, managed by the Hezbollah in a way that we understand, at least at this point, that they are not aiming for the full-scale war. Of course, we are completely ready to such an option. We are not going to take any chances. We all had our lessons from the 7th of October. But looking on the behavior, at least as it looks, also in the last 24 hours, they are shooting some rockets, maybe some UAVs, some anti-tank missiles that are being shot toward Israel, but all of those are being successfully, vast majority of them are being successfully encountered by the IDF. Those rockets, most of them are being intercepted.
Hopefully it's recording.
UAVs are being shot down, and the rockets or the missiles that are being shot toward Israel, most of the units, the Hezbollah terrorist units, are being hit even before they manage to shoot their missiles. So we still see it happening in this area, also in the last 24 hours. Of course, it is important to mention that what was released yesterday by the United States, it is super important that knowing that this, I had the privilege a few years ago to visit myself such a submarine. This is a very impressive war machine with conventional, but I would say very sophisticated missiles and capabilities, which is very important for this region. And of course, it would allow the United States to enlarge its all options, I would say, in all different directions that could occur in this region. And this is very important.
Thank you, General Gavish. I'd like to immediately turn to Dr. Barbaki. As a strategist, when you look at the Middle East, and obviously you see that Hamas has been obviously enabled by the Islamic Republic of Iran.
We'll take a commercial here. Go to my store, get structural nail silver soaps. I have them in, different varieties. This will help neutralize pathogens. It's a very high quality soap. Get a few bars of this. It's a great soap. All right. I have this in this is oatmeal spice. I have it in charcoal tea tree, lemongrass, peppermint, and one other scent I can't remember. But please go to my store, get the structural nanosource soaps, very high quality, and you help to support my work and my channel. Thank you. Back to PNN.
Lebanon is plagued with Hezbollah, which has dominated that country to the abyss, so to speak, and unfortunately is now also preparing itself for war with Israel, as well as in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen. We see Iran's tentacles operating simultaneously in order to prepare themselves for a wider conflagration, something that Iran is obviously directing, facilitating, funding, and also providing the weaponry to follow up on. How do you see this complexity evolve, since obviously the war between Israel and Hamas and its affiliated terror groups in Gaza Strip are all operating not only at the behest of Islam as they boastfully proclaim, but also at the behest of the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Well, Jonathan, I think it's very important to reestablish and recreate, regenerate deterrence in an effective way, not only vis-a-vis Hamas, but about the head of the octopus, no, which is in Tehran. No? And in that sense, I think Israel needs not only a clear victory, but we all need a kind of humiliating victory, not only over Hamas, but on all the movements that are behind Tehran all across the region and the world. We need to reestablish deterrence in an effective way, and that can only be achieved through a clear-cut victory in Gaza and in the streets in Europe and in the region in general, no? As having in mind, obviously, the head of the snake, which is clearly the Republic Islamic of Iran.
Thank you, Dr. Barraki. I'd like also to ask you, General, considering the fact that when we look at the various complexities, and I need to put things, obviously our viewers are aware of this. I am conservative Christian, look at the world in a prism that aligns myself with this reality. Nevertheless, when I look at what the Biden administration has done, it was quite impressive in its rapid response, standing up for Israel, but also standing up for the morals and values that the United States has stood for so many years. But if we look at everything that led to this moment, it was one after another decisions on the geostrategic scale that were quite frankly emboldening the enemies and adversaries of the United States to act, and has also allowed for a vacuum to emerge that ultimately emboldened even Hamas to jab at Israel, if I may call that massacre and the abhorrent activities that were conducted in that scale a jab, but to the degree that Israel brought about its wrath upon the terror organizations in the Gaza Strip with an outlook of the complexities throughout the entire region.
Yeah, I would simply say that Bob Gates is right. Our former Secretary of Defense, former CIA director, former National Security Deputy Director, he said that Joe Biden hasn't made a good foreign policy decision in his entire career. We saw that when he was President Obama's vice president. We also see that now where he's brought the exact same team in with him, and the echo chamber among that foreign policy team is quite dramatic. All you have to do is read this month's Foreign Affairs article by Jake Sullivan, which had to be redacted when it went online because it was so out of date by the time it was published, as they were basically thumping their chests about what a great job they were doing in Gaza. So I would say the challenge with this administration is they're very, very tactical. They try to solve each problem one at a time. There is no holistic geostrategic view that this administration has, and I think in many ways that's what's led to the problems we're seeing today.
Unfortunately, you made me think about the quote by Sun Tzu: "Tactics absent a strategy is the slowest way to defeat." But Mr. Owen, if we look at the various complexities at hand, what do you put your finger on as the core issue right now to focus upon?
Both the Israeli military and public are highly motivated following the massacre and are determined to win, regardless of the cost, except for the hostages. However, there is some disappointment because of the routine methods that the IDF has been conducting itself in Gaza. No special operation, no indirect approach. Maybe they are still working on it, and we will wake up one day to find out that, yes, they had something up their sleeve.
General Kavish, your perspective on the various complexities at hand, and also if you can touch briefly on the multi-tier system, obviously in collaboration with the United States under CENTCOM, that was put in place in the event of a multi-sector conflagration, obviously within the bounds of what you're allowed to say.
Yeah, I would just would like to refer for a second. I really don't know about any disappointment that there is for the way that the IDF is conducting the war in the Gaza Strip. The contrary, I think that what the Israeli public is seeing and the world is seeing a very professional way of fighting the first of the ground forces together with the Air Force and the Navy, and everything is very coordinated, very professional, very professionally being conducted. So I think this is what we see. We see a very professional military who is doing his job and will continue to do his job because he is determined to win this war. Of course, for the multi-tier defense, this is something that for the first time was fully applied during this war. We used to see in the past only the Iron Dome that was the one who's defending Israel against the rocket that were coming mainly for the Gaza Strip. But this during this war, we saw the full array of defense, and the multi-tier concept was very effective, I would say. We all remember that there were some missiles that have been shot from the Red Sea, very long distance ones, some distance ones which were coming also from the Gaza Strip, and basically Israel applied all his tier, the Iron Dome, the David Sling, the Arrow, which is, I think, very impressive. The results are very impressive, but we also emphasize all the time, mainly to the Israeli population, that the defense is never hermetic, and we still need to listen to the orders which are issued by the Home Front Command, and once there is a siren, we know that there is an array of missiles or rockets being shot toward Israel. Everyone needs to go to the shelter, and this combination of kinetic interception from one hand and from the other hand, going to the shelter, this is what saved hundreds of lives here in Israel. And fortunately, the number of people that were hit by rockets during this war is very low.
Dr. Barraki, we have roughly 2 minutes left, so I'll give you one and one for General Kimmett. What do you look at right now that Israel should focus on within the range of complexities at hand?
Well, I think on the foreign front, there is a diplomatic challenge, which is to convince the capitals in Europe and Washington in particular that the IDF needs more time to accomplish their tactical and strategic goals. Buying time is vital for the victory of Israel, and that's what they should be focused on the diplomatic front, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Barraki. General Kimmett?
My only point would be that Doran was right. The Israeli Defense Forces have done brilliantly, which is unfortunately why your country has lost the moral authority among some of the capitals in the world. You are no longer being seen as a victim of brutalist terrorist aggression. You're now being seen as a bully. The question now is, yes, 1,100 Israelis were lost, but how many lives do the Palestinians need to lose before the bill is paid? So it goes back to Emil's original point. You are losing space, you are losing time. This has got to be accelerated because the world is starting to turn against you. And I say that as a friend.
I appreciate that.
Here's the issue. If you focus on placating to the peoples of the world, placating to to the Western powers, and you slow down your operations to root out terrorism. That means eliminating Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. Then you're kicking the can down the road and it's going to get a lot worse. And God is testing Israel. If Israel goes in, God is basically saying, don't worry about the Western powers. You will win. I'm with you. It's very simple. It's just like a biblical phrase, a biblical verse right out of Numbers, right? You know, go get the job done. I am with you. Once the Israelis go, oh, we're afraid, then God's going to say to Israel, why didn't you listen to me? I told you, go in, I'm with you. And things are going to get a lot worse. And there's going to be a heavier curse on everybody, including Israel. This is not your normal set of events because of the whole alignment of Rosh Hashanah and Simchas Torah and all the things that were happening and all the crazy stuff with the liberals. Israel will win if they go full out. The United States is being judged. Are you going to be back in Israel or not? And the moment you're not, then it's going to be really it's going to look negative in God's eyes, saying that you did not help the children of Israel.
Very much. I think it's very important to note the fact that there is a double standard here. If we look at the disinformation being pushed forward very, very robustly, it impacts the masses ultimately to follow various narratives that has nothing to do with reality. It's completely detached. Looking at the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, for instance, which was concerned of the PLO during the 1970s and the attacks that were committed against the people of Jordan, time and again. It took them a period of time, including the hijacking and bombing of 3 air carriers that were ultimately civilian carriers with a destination to both London and New York, were bombed on live television, but these generations don't remember that anymore. And then, of course, Jordan, according to the figures, went on and attacked the Palestinians, killing some 3,500, if I'm not mistaken, according to the official figures. Obviously, those figures are a lot higher in reality, but we will leave the double standard for another update since we ran out of time. I'd like to thank Mr. Owen, General Gavish, Dr. Baraki, and General Kimmett for taking out of your times to update us on the latest. And I'd like also to take this opportunity to thank all of you and to highlight TV7 Israel is 100% donation-based. And therefore, if you're blessed by our productions and would like to help support our accumulating costs for these daily updates, please do so by visiting our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.
All right, so that's the Israeli spin, and I think it's important to, I'm playing, Fox 20. I'm playing Fox. I'm playing CNN. I'm playing Al Jazeera. I'm playing MSNBC. I'm playing, France 24, I-24. I'm BBC. I'm playing a lot of different videos. I'm not just focusing on Israel perspective or just focusing on the BBC or Al Jazeera. I think it's really important to get, a mosaic of how the coverage is in the media on this crisis with Israel-Hamas war. All right. But I am very strict in my stance, very conservative in my stance. We are being judged, and Israel's boundaries are going to need to go back to the temple times, the biblical times. All right. Question is, what exactly are those borders? Because there's like 2 different interpretations, but it needs to go back to, just to be simple, needs to go back to the biblical boundaries that were circumscribed by God, written in the Torah, and that rebooting of the temple. because it's a machine. It's a very metaphysical machine, but it is about harmonics, and somehow the harmonics of blood and death and 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 um, light, all these things allow for this energy of the Shekhinah to rest. We are dealing with something that is a much higher level of intelligence, much higher level of knowledge and of science than the science level that we have today. We are phenomenally more advanced than we were a couple hundred years ago. But there is an intelligence level that we have lost, and that this rebooting of the temple is part of that. I mean, I'll tell you, those pyramids, the original reason why they made those pyramids, because I think they were repurposed, but the original purpose was an energy source. Those things are machines, you know. And there's some knowledge that came out when the Jews left Egypt on being able to harness some of this energy with these boxes, these capacitors, you know, because the ark is a capacitor. If you look at the schematics of it, you know, it's a capacitor. And you know, there's something to do with the tonation of the prayers, and something to do with blood and the sacrificing of the animals and the burning of the animal parts. There's a harmonic that activates this machine if the people that are doing it are properly doing all the precepts and prepare their own, you know, purification, their own individual purification. This thing boots up, you know. Aaron had a problem booting up the system in the tabernacle, and he needed Moses' help to get it to boot up. And you're only supposed to have one in there, you know. I don't know all the details, but you know, there's only supposed to be one in the Holy of Holies. But you know, so there's this, if something's just slightly off, it doesn't work. Everything has to be kosher in a way, even though that's not the proper term. But you know, it's just, it's a machine. It's a machine, and it brings down blessing, and it brings down a lot of knowledge. We're dealing with a very, very high power that's moving us along to this. But we are being judged, and it's going to be carnage. And there's, you know, because we are a warring generation, this ushering into the Messianic era, which we will not benefit from most likely. It will be future generations, maybe the next generation or the generation after that, but it's probably not going to be us. But we are creating the foundation for them to have the lasting peace. And that's okay, you know. That's our mission in life, I guess, you know. It's not necessarily true that you do things and that you're going to fully get the benefit from it, or any benefit from it. You know, you're in the realization that you're moving it along for a future generation. But we have a lot of people that are very self-centered, and you know, they want to hide, and they want to protect themselves, and they want to be able to benefit from this or whatever. And the reality is, the situation is everyone's being judged, and some people are going to be cursed more than others. That's just a fact. And you can try to spin it all you want, but if you don't root out terrorism, this thing is going to continue, and it's going to get worse. And I think that this has been ushered in much quicker. One, because of the more advanced capability of these terrorist groups. But I think that the world has lost those JFKs, you know, where you're in a crisis and you can de-escalate it. I think we have a lot of people that are incompetent in government, especially in the Biden administration, that if they were put in the same situation as JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we most likely would have gone to nuclear war. So I think we have a lot of incompetent people. And we have generals that don't know how to win wars. What war have we won in my lifetime? Out of the 50 plus years of my life, what war did we win? None. No war. Because we kicked the can down the road. Well, now it's time. Now it's time. All right, so please go to my store and get structural nano silver lozenges. All right, I have it in a 20 count and a 100 count for the drops. The 20 count is in sweet menthol and green apple, and the 100 count is in blueberry, and the other flavor is honey lemon. Structural nano silver soaps. Again, go to my store and get them. And like I said, you know, you can improve your hormonal health, male and female, by taking lignans. It's a powder. I mix it with hummus. Take it every day. You can mix it with water, or you can mix it in a smoothie, whatever. Some people prefer smoothies. I don't like taking smoothies. But, and it'll help boost your immune system. When you do that and you have a proper immune system, guess what? Your cells can fight things that start to become cancerous. A proper immune system is really important for the anti-aging protocol. And get the deodorants. I have a deodorant that's in citrus, and the other scent is in peppermint, tea tree, and lavender. So it's a peppermint lavender scent. This is a very, very high quality deodorant bar that will help to detoxify your body. It's made from all natural ingredients, essential oils from the Himalayas. And not only is it an essential oil from the Himalayas, it has a certain harmonic to it. The oil has a harmonic to it. So, you know, what people have been starting to notice is that not only do you have a compound, but there can be a frequency that's put onto the compound to improve the quality of it. So, you know, and this whole harmonic kind of technology, this whole idea of how to use harmonics is just starting. All right. You know, the scientific literature and the scientific community are just starting to understand the importance of harmonics. And that's why, you know, you get back to the temple idea, and it's about harmonics, and certain things are happening. And there's something to do with blood and harmonics. You know, so go to my store and get the great products that I offer. Make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have a Bitchute, Rumble, and Brighteon. Please subscribe to all 6 channels. Link is in the description of this video. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description. Help support my work by purchasing the health products that I offer. Follow my protocol, and also please donate. I have, you can donate through Buy Me a Coffee. Link is in the description of this video, and you can donate through Stripe or PayPal on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, on the homepage at the very bottom of the page. That will help support my news coverage. Please subscribe to my Patreon channel and be a paid subscriber. That way you're helping with the news coverage and you get a unique perspective. How many people would be able to, you know, play a video like from, let's say, TV7, and while one of the generals were speaking, I was looking at the book behind his ear and gave you a little nugget story of behind the scenes of what I have learned by listening to people, and you know, some of the poetic way of seeing that setup. And what's the hint? Sometimes the divine talks to you in a strange way. It's not like a voice. It's through representation, and the sensitive people can see the representation. We were being hinted. Pay attention to Marshall. Pay attention to Marshall. Listen to Marshall. War get it done, have lasting peace. That's how you do it. It's not about appeasement. And unfortunately, what's happening in the Biden administration, that's all we get. Short-term thinking will lead to long-term deaths. Thank you for listening. Please make sure that you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and we have to fight and make sure that the ultra-liberal doesn't take over the world. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.